Welcome back, thrill seeker. If you thought the nightmare ended with the cargo truck sinking into the icy river, you were wrong. For death and hopelessness are merely the gateway to a new, far more ancient horror. What began as a pursuit in a small, cursed village has roots running much deeper, in places where the human mind was never meant to look. My home. I was born here, I grew up here, and I never planned on leaving. It was the kind of place where roots go deep, and the silence of the countryside feels like safety. Or at least, I thought so. My profession allowed me to keep this anchor. As a marine engineer, I spend about 8 or 9 months of the year away from home. I work mostly on dry cargo ships, cruising the major rivers, though I've managed to get out to open sea a couple of times. This whole nightmare began while I was away on a voyage, right in the sweltering heat of midsummer. It started with a single ripple. Our neighbor, Daniel, hanged himself. It was unclear what pushed him to the edge at that moment. He left no suicide note, told no one of his troubles, and gave no warning. He simply took a rope and climbed into the noose. The locals gossiped, of course. Some blamed debts, though Daniel never seemed to owe a dime to anyone. Others said it was loneliness. That felt closer to the truth. As long as I could remember, he had always lived alone. We buried him like a human being, mourned for a respectable time, and forgot. But only 40 days had passed when new news struck. My former schoolteacher, Mrs. Higgins, passed away. It wasn't old age. She had heart trouble and took pills periodically, but one day she swallowed a dose far larger than necessary. Significantly larger. The whole village was in an uproar. Mrs. Higgins was a devout woman who attended church every Sunday and observed every fast. Suicide was the last thing anyone expected from her. Then, things quieted down. For about 2 months, nothing happened. The villagers began to calm down, whispering that perhaps those 2 deaths were just tragic coincidences, dark secrets that no one knew about. Autumn approached, and with it, my journey home. I was due to return after a 6-month voyage. I was desperate to see my family and friends, to simply be back within my own 4 walls. I was terribly tired. They say native walls help you heal, after all. And so, the day finally came. Happy and satisfied with life, I stepped off the bus and called a taxi to take me the last leg of the journey. The car didn't come. I waited for a suspiciously long time. I eventually had to call my friend, Paul, to come and get me. It was already freezing outside. I stood there like a fool, dressed completely inappropriately for the weather. Paul arrived within half an hour, but by then, the cold felt like it had seeped into my very bones. When I climbed into his car, I expected the standard questions about the trip. "Jim, I understand that you haven't been here for half a year and you're not up to speed," Paul said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "But please, listen to me carefully right now and don't interrupt." After that sentence, a cold anxiety settled in my stomach. "Who died?" I asked. He exhaled noisily. "Yes. But the problem is, they aren't just dying." And then he began to list everyone who had passed away during my absence. Honestly, my hair stood on end at the sheer number of people who had gone to the other world. "Wait, you're not joking." He looked at me like I was an idiot. "Do people joke about things like this?" "No, of course not. Unfortunately." "What is happening?" "I told you, don't interrupt. Just listen." From Paul's long and detailed story, I managed to learn the chronology of these terrible events. First Daniel, then Mrs. Higgins, then the lull that lasted 2 months. And then it truly began. People were dying, from tiny children to the elderly. They didn't necessarily take their own lives intentionally. Some disappeared without a trace. Others died due to strange, sometimes inexplicable coincidences. For example, Paul said, his voice lowering, on September 1st, after the school assembly, several students didn't come home. There were 5 of them, all from the same class. To this day, they haven't returned. The police are useless. And one girl, unlike the boys, they found her a week later. She was completely naked, emaciated, and no longer alive. She died from hypothermia in the woods. And old Nick, the guide, he froze to death too. For some godforsaken reason, he went into the local river. His clothes were folded neatly on the bank, he was wearing only swimming trunks. Keep in mind, he went for a swim in an October night. And what is perhaps the strangest thing in this whole story, Paul continued, staring at the dark road, is that we can't figure out the pattern. It might be quiet for a week, and then several people might die in a single day. That's unbelievable. I whispered. Did you notice anything strange yourself? Personally? No. And no one else has either. People just die, and that's it. So what are you saying? I'm not hinting at anything. I don't know. It's all just weird. We need to get out of here, Jim. The sooner, the better. Great. I finally get home, I said with bitterness and annoyance. I didn't say anything else. As we drove through, the village seemed extinct. Now, no one even showed their nose outside their house. People went to the store, went to work, and immediately locked themselves in. Even the youth were sitting at home. Only, it didn't seem to help much. People continued to die just as they had before. You couldn't even turn to your neighbors for comfort anymore, everyone looked at each other like wolves. A little later, I had the opportunity to verify this personally. The central street is empty, I observed. No one in the yards. I take it everyone is hiding. You understand correctly, Paul said. And you shouldn't go anywhere either. I listened to my friend's advice and didn't look for adventure. At home, my wife waited for me. Our son, Evan, was nowhere to be seen. Finally, you're back, she breathed. Hello, sunshine. That's right. I learned something from Paul, I started, but the faint smile vanished from her face instantly. Jim, don't be mad. I wanted to tell you when you arrived. You were on a voyage. I didn't want to make you nervous for no reason. Irene, we have to leave this place. And the faster, the better. Yes, I know. I know. I already spoke to work about it. The boss obligated me to work 2 more weeks. Screw him. The bastard. Why didn't you leave earlier with Evan? I asked, holding her. Because I thought everything would work out sooner or later. Then I just started waiting for you. I couldn't leave alone, really. I hugged her tight. The more I looked at my wife, the more convinced I became that things were very bad. Instead of my positive and cheerful beloved, I saw a woman worn down by life. Her skin had acquired a gray tint, dark circles had formed under her eyes, and she had lost so much weight she could hide behind a mop. The only good news was that our son was far away from this place, staying with relatives. The very next day, Irene wrote her resignation letter. She thought about taking sick leave, but couldn't manage it. The doctor wouldn't agree. Now, we had to live every day on pins and needles, praying to the Almighty that nothing would happen to our family. My wife returned home around 7 in the evening and reported that her colleague hadn't shown up for her shift today. "I don't think she'll ever come back," she concluded. I remained silent, expressing my agreement. It was as clear as day. The week went on as usual. Friday arrived. In the evening, Irene came home carrying a bag of groceries, and we began to cook dinner together. During all this time, no one visited us. Before, we used to expect guests almost every Friday. It felt dismal in my soul, but I could understand our friends. I had no desire to drag myself to any of their houses for obvious reasons. About an hour later, we were sitting in the living room, having dinner and chatting about this and that. "Listen, I'm worn out from work today. Do you mind if I go to sleep?" Irene asked, rubbing her temples. "Of course not. Go. I'll come later." "Okay." Irene washed up and headed to the bedroom. I started cleaning up after dinner. There wasn't much to do, and I didn't want to watch TV in case I woke my wife, plus, it was better not to attract attention with the flickering light. So, I lay down next to her and stared at my phone. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the window. Knock. 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 "Jim. Open up. It's Tommy." I recognized him immediately. Tommy was my friend. At that moment, I felt no doubt and no fear. All because he loved arranging surprises like this. Not only would Tommy arrive without warning, but he could also barge in at any time of day or night. Irene was normally fine with it, and I was used to it. I hurriedly threw on a jacket and went out into the yard. We hugged tightly, and he immediately announced, "Jim. I got divorced." "No way." I couldn't believe my ears. "Yeah. Let's go. Walk me to my place. Or drive. Why don't you come in? It's better not to be out right now. I know what's happening here. Don't be a chicken. We'll take the car, it'll be quick." "Well, if that's the case, let's go." The whole time, I was looking for a catch, but everything seemed normal. I didn't notice any strangeness about my friend. We walked toward the car without incident. "Tommy, I can't stay long. Irene is alone, you understand." Of course, of course. My friend didn't beat around the bush and almost immediately laid out all the details regarding his divorce. I listened carefully, nodding occasionally. There was nothing unusual about it, they just fell out of love. That's all. We stood there for a bit, and then I realized I needed to go home. "Tommy, I'm going. You come over tomorrow, okay?" "Okay." "Will you walk back yourself, or should I give you a lift?" "Better drive me. It's pitch black out there." Tommy started to say something to me when suddenly, from behind the door of my house, Irene's voice rang out. "Jim! Get away from there. Quickly." "Damn it, do you really think that's your wife?" Tommy asked calmly, tilting his head. For a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. Damn me for leaving the house in the middle of the night. Who is who? Maybe Tommy is pretending. Maybe that's not Irene behind the door at all. Jim! Do you hear me? My wife's scream reached my ears again. Despite the fear overflowing in me at that moment, a sensible thought visited my head. Tommy, give me your phone, please. I left mine in the house. This was, of course, a lie. I hadn't completely lost my mind, my phone was in my pocket. Why? Tommy asked, his smile not reaching his eyes. Well, I'll call Irene. See what she's doing. You don't need to call her. I'll tell you this, she is asleep. She is dreaming her 10th dream. And that thing standing behind the window? That's not your wife. You won't give me the phone. Nope, he declared without a shadow of a doubt. That means this is not Tommy standing in front of me. I pretended not to suspect anything and gripped the heavy mug of water I had carried out with me. It was filled almost to the brim. Just what I needed. As I brought it to my lips as if to drink, I launched the mug with all my might straight into his face. I turned and sprinted toward the house. Irene! Is that you? I screamed into the darkness. Yes. Yes. Get in the car, quickly. She grabbed my hand and dragged me to our car. Stop. You can't hide from me, screams rang out behind my back. I didn't even think about turning around. The car was already running. Irene, damn it, how did you even know I was out here? I'll explain at home. My wife chuckled nervously, then added darkly, if we have one. Are you checking? You bet. As we drove toward the house, or where I thought we were going, I noticed something strange. The surroundings changed. There was a small strip of forest, but then it was left behind, and fields surrounded us on both sides of the road. Irene, where are we? You think I found you at Tommy's house? My head started to spin from such thoughts. Something painful squeezed in my chest. By my calculations, we were 20 kilometers away from the village. And what was surprising? The darkness was slowly dissipating, replaced by dawn. That meant several hours had passed, not the couple of minutes I thought. More and more questions were born in my head, and the realization came that my wife had miraculously saved me. As soon as we reached the safety of a new location, I literally bombarded her with questions. She remained silent for a few seconds, as if gathering her thoughts, and after some time, she began to tell the story. Basically, I had a bad dream. I dreamt that you died. It was so vivid, so realistic, that I woke up. And when I realized you weren't actually in the house, it dawned on me that the dream might be prophetic. I found you very simply. Remember we installed that geolocation app on our phones? I nodded silently. Well, that's how I found you. But, you weren't at your friend's house. And you weren't in the village. She looked me in the eye. Jim, you were standing at the very edge of the ravine. The one with the river flowing far below it. I vividly imagined that place, and my legs gave way from the realization. What a fool I am. I knew I shouldn't go out, but I went anyway. It's okay. You're safe. Just don't do that again. So, we still have to be here for another week minimum? No way. We are renting another place today. I'll commute from the city to work for a week. Nothing terrible will happen. That same day, the real Tommy texted me. It turned out he didn't plan to visit the village until winter. We gathered everything necessary and set off. We managed to rent a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, but I was unspeakably glad even for that, after surviving the most terrifying event of my life. It seemed that the worst was behind us. But it wasn't. In a single night, about 12 people died in the village. This information leaked into the media. The police were working full force in the settlement. We didn't want to return there, but almost all our belongings were still in that house. Our car, as if sensing something, flatly refused to start. We had to call a taxi. Even though it cost a tidy sum. The car took a long time to arrive, of course, but after half an hour, a driver was found who agreed to take us there. The bad reputation of the place had spread throughout the district. The taxi driver dropped us off near the house, and without a word, we immediately started packing. Irene busied herself in the kitchen. I quickly dealt with the hallway and headed to the living room. It was trickier with the household appliances. I had to figure out how to pack them properly. Luckily, there were some boxes at home. Having dealt with most of the things, I wanted to go to the bedroom, when suddenly something atypical caught my eye. A piece of paper lay on the floor. With trembling hands, I picked it up and began to read the message written in scrawled, jagged handwriting. "You can't hide from me. Irene." My wife immediately dropped everything she was doing and entered the living room. "What is it? Did you see this?" I asked, waving the ill-fated piece of paper in front of her face. "No, what is it?" "Read it." She examined the sheet carefully, then asked a question. "Did you pack everything?" "No, there are still things in the bedroom." "Screw the bedroom. Let's get out of here." "You're right. Let's go." Irene called a cargo taxi, a moving truck. Surprisingly, it pulled up to the house quite quickly. The loader, who was also the driver, helped place our belongings in the back of the truck. On the way out, I noted that the street was empty, just as usual. Now it's not my problem. We are leaving. The truck drove quite fast. There were no traffic jams, nothing. The road was smooth asphalt. Suddenly, there was a thud. What the hell? The road is flat. Another massive blow followed. So strong that my head hit the ceiling of the cab. What is happening? What's wrong with the truck? Damn it! I yelled at the top of my lungs at the driver. His face expressed no emotion. As if this was how it should be. Hello? Am I talking to myself? I addressed the driver for the last time. And then, he slowly turned his face in my direction. He croaked the phrase that I was already fed up with and that terrified me to the core. "You can't hide." After that, his face began to deform monstrously. The skin fell to the floor in flaps like wet paper, exposing the bones of the skull. Razor-sharp teeth cut through his mouth, and instead of eyes, 2 black holes shone. Irene screamed at the top of her lungs. I was paralyzed, unable to utter a word. Then, the picture changed. I realized it was the end for us. The monster vanished in a flash. And we found ourselves trapped in the cab of the cargo truck, which was sinking deeper into a body of water with every second. Icy water filled the cabin, rising up our chests. And the door handles, they just wouldn't open. While the protagonist of You Can't Hide ultimately failed to escape the entity whose face peeled away, his tragic end confirmed a simple truth: some places, and some entities, simply do not let go. The despair and chilling terror he experienced in his final seconds echo in a completely different, wild, and isolated part of the world. Let us leave behind the sinking truck and the cold river water to travel to a place where civilization has left no trace, and eyes are a privilege it is better not to possess. Immerse yourself in a story that reveals what happens when you trespass into the dominion of the primal force that dwells in the wilderness. We venture now into the Valley of the Eyeless. Here is the literary adaptation of the story about the Valley of the Eyeless. #Fog the Valley of the Eyeless. An appetizing aroma wafted from the pot where rice and stewed meat were bubbling together. My stomach was already cramping with hunger. Since our early start and throughout the long, exhausting drive, I had only managed to snack on a couple of sandwiches. It was 3 in the afternoon, but in an hour, the sun would already begin its descent toward the sunset. Here in the north, the daylight hours are unforgivingly short. We still needed time to capture some cinematic shots of the surrounding tundra and record my commentary about the Valley of the Eyeless. I am a blogger, running a channel dedicated to mysticism and the paranormal on YouTube. Over 5 years, I've amassed nearly 3 million subscribers. At first, I simply narrated scary stories, but then I started traveling to eerie locations, mostly abandoned sites with bad reputations. A few months ago, my subscribers began urging me to head to the far north, to a notorious place called the Valley of the Eyeless. According to legends, people disappear here. Or rather, they are found dead, stripped of their eyes. Hence the name. The very first mention of the Valley of the Eyeless dates back, I believe, to 1891, when a group of 7 tourists from St. Petersburg vanished. After weeks of searching, 4 of them were found. The records state that their bodies were mutilated, presumably by wild beasts. Later, during the Revolution, a whole series of disappearances occurred. One of the most interesting stories for me happened in 1941. A small squad of Soviet scouts was passing through the valley, tracking a group of German soldiers. At some point, a thick fog suddenly blanketed the valley, and our men heard screams and bursts of automatic fire. When they arrived at the scene, the fog dissipated as quickly as it had appeared, revealing a horrific tableau. In a hollow amidst the rocks lay 6 dead German soldiers with black holes where their eyes should have been. The edges of the eye sockets were burned, the flesh charred to a crisp. The only surviving soldier had lost his mind and was incapable of answering questions. The rest of the enemy group had vanished without a trace. Since then, 3 groups of tourists, including foreigners, have disappeared in the valley over the years. Only 6 bodies were ever found, all blinded in the exact same way. Investigations were launched, but they led nowhere. The most recent horrific event occurred in the mid-90s. A group of about 20 young majors, rich kids, drove out to the valley to celebrate something. They set up camp near the nameless lake, drank, and partied. 16 of them decided to go down to the lake for a swim. Despite it being a cold summer, the students who remained at the camp later reported that an unexpected, dense fog rolled in. So thick you couldn't see half a meter in front of you. Then, they heard terrible screams. Because of the fog, they couldn't immediately rush to help their friends. It dissolved as quickly as it had come. On the shore, they found 1 girl, driven insane and tearing her own hair out, and 10 mutilated bodies. Again, no eyes. The rest are still considered missing. I had read posts in various online communities from people claiming to have personally been to the Valley of the Eyeless. They claimed to have seen the ominous fog, heard screams, or found the eyeless carcasses of animals. But it all seemed more like made-up campfire stories. Even the valley's rich history felt like folklore. I couldn't find specific names of the tourists or soldiers, nor any newspaper archives. The only lead could have been the witnesses of the tragedy in the 90s, but I couldn't find their real names or contact them either. Be that as it may, I flew north for content with my two friends, Anthony and Vic. We reached the Valley of the Eyeless on ATVs, driving around for a long time to get some spectacular B-roll footage. Then we looked for a suitable spot for our camp, where we intended to spend 3 days. We chose a flat clearing near a low rock formation and swept the area with dosimeters and gas analyzers. Fortunately, the readings were within normal limits. The valley itself lies in a depression, surrounded by hills and mountains capped with white snow. In the center sits that same nameless lake with crystal clear water. Everything around is covered in red and orange lichen and some white flowers unknown to us. They gave the valley the appearance of a beautiful, alien landscape. If only we could see and film the northern lights here, asterisk. While Vic and I were setting up the tent, Anthony gathered a handful of sweet blueberries near the camp. And when we started building the fire, 5 real, wild reindeer passed not far from our sight. I had only ever seen them in a zoo. Despite the grim legend of the valley, I was starting to like it here. After lunch, Anthony went down to the lake, and I settled onto a folding chair in front of the camera on its tripod. I sat against the backdrop of the endless tundra, framing the shot so that the low black rock, under which we pitched our tent, was visible on the left. It would protect us well from the wind. The view behind me was beautiful and highly atmospheric. Perfect for recounting the legend we had learned from a local hunter. Rolling, Vic commanded briefly, leaning over the camera. I began speaking in a quiet, mysterious voice. According to the beliefs of the indigenous people, a certain spirit dwells in these lands and protects its territory from evil. It is so ancient that it lost its name long ago. Most of the time it remains in hibernation, waking only when it senses that someone is showing disrespect to this land. And then, the spirit punishes them cruelly. Behind the black rock, something grunted loudly, followed by a growl. Startled, I jumped up, knocking over my chair. Dry branches cracked. The sound of heavy footsteps thudding against the mossy carpet faded away. Someone, or something, was hastily fleeing our camp. Only a second later did I realize that I had automatically grabbed the holster of the traumatic pistol on my belt. Lowering my hand, I exchanged a confused glance with a frozen Vic and laughed nervously. What the hell was that? Did you record that? Yeah. Cameras rolling. Vic smoothed his short beard with a habitual gesture. But that sounded like a wolverine. Before we came here, I watched videos about the local wildlife. Hang on. While Vic dug through his phone with intense concentration, thankfully, the internet signal was barely holding on here, Anthony returned hurriedly. He had another handful of berries, yellow ones this time. In his other hand, he carried a small camera, the red light indicating it was recording. What's going on? He asked, out of breath. Someone was lurking near the rocks, I replied. Vic says it's a wolverine. Well, at least it's not a bear or a wolf. Though a wolverine isn't exactly good news either, Anthony chuckled grimly. They have jaws like, damn. Well, in case of an encounter with aggressive wild animals, we have more than just non-lethal pistols. It'll help drive away any idiots, too. Although I doubt we'll meet anyone in the middle of the quiet, cold tundra. Vic managed to find a video of a growling wolverine and showed it to us. After watching it closely a few times, I agreed that the growl was indeed similar. I wouldn't say it calmed me down much. The main thing was that the beast shouldn't poke its nose into our camp, especially at night. By nightfall, we managed to film a couple of scenes and review them. Then Anthony and I went down to the lake, walking about 1 kilometer from the camp, lighting our way with flashlights. Right by the water's edge, we found an old wooden post, about 1.5 meters high. Someone had scratched runes into it with a sharp object. Neither the guys nor I understood them, but I took a picture just in case, to analyze back in the studio. Maybe it was a message from old-timers who believed in mysticism. Or maybe someone just decided to pull a prank. Sitting in front of this post, I spent half an hour conducting an experiment with a dictaphone. That is, I hit record, asked questions trying to make contact with spirits, and then listened to the playback. No interference, no strange sounds. Only once did Anthony and I nearly suffer heart failure when a fox screamed nearby. It's a good thing we both know how those bastards scream, otherwise, someone's heart definitely would have stopped. When we returned to camp, Vic had already boiled the kettle over the fire. We sat down to drink tea and record our comments on the day. The shot in the frame must have looked gorgeous. A night in a quiet, deserted valley. A vast, clear sky overhead filled with stars. And the three of us by the fire. Well, it's too early to draw conclusions for the first day, I began, looking at my steaming mug. But so far, everything has been calm. We haven't noticed any anomalies. The only oddity is the markings on the post. But the nature here is stunning. We're just sitting here with the boys, purely enjoying the silence and the fresh air. Yeah, it's beautiful here, of course. Anthony looked around leisurely, smiling dreamily. Beautiful, Vic smirked sourly. But sitting here alone is kinda creepy. He pointed to the right, toward the parked ATVs. When you guys left, something started rustling over there. I threw a rock, scared it off. Looked like an Arctic fox, small and white. Then I went to check if the little pest scratched the quads, and look what I found. Vic reached into the pocket of his branded jacket and pulled out an unusual trinket, colored by the firelight. A bracelet made of small bones, fangs, and stones. I whistled in surprise, took the find from Vic, and examined it more closely. Anthony got up from his chair and leaned toward me, also eyeing the bracelet with curiosity. "Alex, look." He touched one of the black stones, flipping it over. A strange circular symbol was scratched onto it. Anthony straightened up and pointed toward the lake. We saw the exact same rune on that post. Damn, someone didn't just scratch those for no reason. I know. I think these are shamanic signs, I said, frowning at the bracelet. This thing could have been used for some kind of ritual. The locals in the village told us that animal sacrifices were once performed here to appease the spirits. So, maybe someone is continuing that practice. Man, I just hope no shaman with a chainsaw shows up tonight. Anthony laughed nervously, and Vic and I joined in. We decided that each of us would take a few hours of watch duty during the night. Just in case a wild animal decided to investigate the camp, or if something else happened. Vic volunteered to go first, saying he usually went to bed late anyway. Then it was Anthony's turn, and mine would be towards morning. Wishing Vic a good night, a truly good night, I went to sleep in the tent, crawling into my thick sleeping bag. the temperature in the tundra dropped significantly at night. Alex. Alex, wake up. I woke up abruptly, opening my eyes and groaning in protest at the blinding flashlight beam. A few seconds later, I realized where I was and sluggishly rubbed my eyes. "Is it my turn already?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep. Beside me, Anthony stirred in his bag and moaned incoherently. Strange, why did Vic decide to wake me? We had agreed otherwise. "Get up, guys, I think we have a problem," he muttered rapidly and exited the tent. I exchanged a confused glance with Anthony and scrambled out of the sleeping bag. I rubbed my face hard with my palms to chase away the drowsiness. Crawling out of the tent, I grabbed the traumatic pistol, not really understanding what was happening. As soon as I poked my head into the open air, I shivered from the biting cold. The fire, for some reason, was out. Only then did I realize that drastic changes had occurred in the valley of the Isles. It was no longer quiet or peaceful. In the night, very close to our camp, loud voices and music could be heard. A few dozen meters away from us, it was hard to tell exactly in the dark, a large bonfire burned, illuminated by the headlights of 3 cars. In the light, figures could be seen jumping and dancing. I shook my head and, nearly knocking off my beanie, looked at Vic, sincerely hoping he would explain everything. But he just shrugged. In one hand, the red light of the camera was glowing. "Yeah," Anthony groaned hoarsely, wrapping his jacket tighter. "In the modern world, you can't escape intrusive civilization anywhere." "Damn it, they're going to ruin all our footage," I muttered, massaging my eyelids with 2 fingers. My temples were starting to throb from the rude awakening and irritation. "I suggest we get out of here right now," Vic proposed unhappily. "Move to the other shore, maybe it'll be quieter there." "You want to drive in the middle of the night?" Anthony asked doubtfully, stepping closer to us. "That's exactly when all the animals are running around." "And you want to stay here?" Vic replied quickly. This meant he was starting to get angry. Who knows who these people are and what they want? Maybe they just came to party, or maybe they're some kind of cultists. When I heard the cars coming, I ran and put out the fire. "Well, you did the right thing." I nodded and sighed heavily, agreeing with Vic's proposal. "Yeah, let's pack up, guys. We'll look for a place where we can't hear them. And if not..." I spread my hands sadly. "We'll wait for morning and go to a hotel. Reschedule the shoot for a few days." Of course, I didn't want to reschedule, but in the worst case, we had no choice. Turning our flashlights to low power, we began to hurriedly pack our things. The tent was the biggest hassle. The whole packing process took maybe 5 minutes. And during that time, I became convinced we had made the right decision. 2 people from that noisy group tried to approach us. They whistled and shouted something unintelligible. Anthony nervously grabbed the hunting shotgun. Luckily, those guys were stopped by their own friends, and we sped up even more, rolling up the tent. Finally, we hoisted the heavy bags onto the ATVs, strapped the baskets to the racks, and took our seats. Illuminating the ignition with my flashlight, I inserted the key. I didn't have time to turn it. I was distracted by a strange exclamation from Anthony. "Guys, what is that?" He was pointing toward the lake, which was barely visible in the night. Its waters shimmered under the crescent moon. Rising from the surface were white plumes of fog, seemingly glowing in the darkness. It was thickening too quickly, creeping toward the uneven shore and rising high above the ground. I zoned out for a moment, watching the mesmerizing spectacle. I was brought back to reality by the enthusiastic shouts of the large group nearby. They had also noticed the fog and were now pointing at it. It covered the entire valley with unnatural speed. That's definitely fog, not some kind of gas. Damn, boys, let's put on the respirators. I turned to the cargo rack and hurriedly unzipped one of the bags. Meanwhile, Anthony and Vic pulled out the dosimeters and gas analyzers. Anthony was recording the strange phenomenon on his camera. I pulled out the respirator masks, threw them right into the guy's hands, and pulled one over my own face. The fog had already reached our campsite. It enveloped us in a solid white wall. It was so incredibly dense that nothing was visible beyond a meter. The light from our headlamps seemed to be swallowed by it. It seemed to dampen sound, too, because the voices of the loud guys in the 3 cars became significantly quieter. Okay, readings are all normal, Vic droned through his respirator. It's not gas, it's really fog. Listen, this is some abnormal fog, Anthony muttered, panning his camera around. It shouldn't have appeared, well, this fast. Boys, let's get out of here. How do you expect us to drive now? I waved my hand, pointing at the thick white cloud. We'll fall into a ditch and that's it. We should have started earlier. We messed around too long. Suddenly, the dense wall of fog was pierced by a low, drawn-out roar. Goosebumps raced across my entire body, and the hair stood up everywhere it could. I was suddenly thrown into a hot sweat, beads of perspiration forming on my forehead. Mechanically, I gripped the handlebars of the ATV until my knuckles creaked. I had never heard sounds like that, except maybe in movies. I exchanged glances with the guys and met their terrified, huge eyes above the masks. What is that? Vic asked in a sharply hoarse voice, shining his flashlight around. Is that a bear? Sounds more like a moose. Releasing the handlebars, I pulled the shotgun by its strap. The barrel swung back and forth from my trembling. It wouldn't hurt to fire a warning shot into the air first. I really didn't want to shoot an animal. But if it attacked? Hurried footsteps sounded right next to us. In sync, the two of us spun toward the sound, pointing our barrels there. Something, judging by the noise, descended from the rock and ran to the spot where our tent had been. Something big. I shook harder as fear washed over me. Screw this fog. Let's go, Anthony hissed fearfully. In his hands, instead of a pistol or shotgun, he held a flare gun. Noticing it, I immediately had an idea. Tony, fire the flare. I whispered and pointed in the direction where the beast seemed to have run. Anthony didn't need to be asked twice. With a loud pop and a hiss, a bright red light shot out of the barrel. Flying about 10 meters, it illuminated a massive figure out of the white gloom. It stood on 2 legs, hunching heavily. Its long arms reached down to the very earth, and its legs were strangely inverted. The head was crowned with real, branching antlers stretching high up. This creature, neither human nor any known animal, was definitely alive. It shifted from foot to foot, shielding its muzzle from the flare's light with a front paw. I saw it for only a few seconds before the clouds of fog closed in and hid the horrific vision again. I forgot how to breathe from a mixture of terror and shock. God, I wish we had met a bear. At least we know roughly how to deal with that. What is this? What was that? I heard someone's faint mumbling. Through the hoarse voice, I couldn't tell who. What was that thing? That's it, we're leaving, the second friend hissed. Why the hell did we come to this valley? I fully agreed. To hell with this video. Life is more valuable. But how would we get out of the fog? Which way to drive? Getting lost here would be as easy as snapping 2 fingers. And then came the second sound, which surely gave me a handful of gray hairs. Somewhere nearby, a woman screamed wildly, heartbreakingly. I don't know what has to happen to a person for them to scream like that. Several people immediately started yelling after her. A man shouted one word clearly, "Run." And again, that terrible, low, bestial roar rang out. I felt rooted to the seat of the ATV. I gripped the shotgun in a death grip, pressing it tight against my chest. My teeth chattered a staccato rhythm of terror. I already deeply regretted coming to this cursed valley. Holy, guys. Anthony was the first of the 3 of us to snap out of it, rattling his keys, trying to insert them into the ignition. Let's get the hell out of here. Cursing through clenched teeth, I started the ATV and gripped the handlebars tighter, leaving the shotgun dangling on my chest. And then the devil compelled me to look back. The fog parted, as if heavy curtains were being drawn aside, revealing a nightmarish scene. The small tourist camp was destroyed. Shreds of torn tents lay everywhere, food scattered, bottles from an overturned folding table. Embers barely glowed in the trampled fire pit in the middle of the clearing. Because of the crimson moss, the ground seemed soaked in blood. Small scarlet splatters dotted the hood of a white SUV. Pressed against the fender was a disheveled girl. With a frozen, pale face, she stared straight ahead at the remains of the fire. Around it lay bodies, young guys, girls, all dead. Their faces were twisted in terror and death agony. Their eyes were missing. In their place were charred, black holes. If not for the respirator, I probably would have smelled the stench of burnt flesh. And standing near the mutilated bodies were 6 enormous creatures, over 3 meters tall, covered in matted brown fur with bald patches. Their heads were those of deer, with empty black sockets. From these holes and their open mouths, thick crimson streams flowed down their wide necks onto their chests. The largest bastard, probably the leader of this horrific herd, held a still-living, squirming guy by the neck with one paw. Deprived of air, he couldn't scream anymore, only wheeze. Mother of God! Vic growled, grabbing the shotgun from his chest. I immediately followed his example. I aimed the barrel at the monsters, but I couldn't aim properly. My hands were shaking violently with fear. One of the monsters lazily turned its muzzle in our direction, and I froze. A firm thought suddenly appeared: don't shoot at them. You'll only make it worse. My fingers unclenched, releasing the shotgun. Vic also slowly lowered his, sobbing quietly. Behind me, Anthony was muttering something indistinct and fast. Probably a prayer. Meanwhile, the leader raised his other paw, armed with long, black claws. A sharp movement, and 2 hooks plunged with a squelch into the poor guy's eyes. He screamed hoarsely, strangled, kicking his legs wildly. Thick steam poured from his face, like from a boiling pot on a stove. A second or 2 later, he went limp like a rag doll. The monster dropped him to the ground, then leaned lower, moving its stained muzzle as if sniffing something. His kin also lowered themselves to the other bodies. One of them nudged the forehead of a dead girl with its nose, leaving a red print on her white skin. And the girl suddenly shuddered. She opened her mouth, sucked in air with a rasp, and moved her arms clumsily. Two more bodies stirred with quiet moans at the touch of the monsters. I could barely breathe from the unparalleled horror. My limbs cramped. I couldn't reach the handlebars to hit the gas and speed away from the cursed valley. I could only watch, transfixed, as the horned beasts gently picked up the reanimated, twitching corpses in their arms. Treading heavily with hooves on the carpet of moss, they headed toward the lake. Only one of the horned ones looked back at us, but showed no further interest. The fog crawled away after them, revealing the beautiful valley of the Islas, leaving me with my friends and the sole surviving girl in dead silence. In the night sky, the first flare of the northern lights flashed.